moment. But now, with that out of the way, let's introduce our first panelist and dive into the segment, Why Tables Modify Rules in the First Place. So in our first little square there, we have Lord Matt. Actually, it's a big square. I'm in the little square. I got to fix that. I got to make me big. Everybody know.
Your name is on the door.
Right? Who are you? What content do you create? And what is your tabletop RPG experience?
Oh, yeah, I'm Lord Mattias. I got a YouTube channel called Lord Mattias on Rumble. It's called Gaming with Lord Mattias. I think the link that you'll see in the description actually goes to my blog, which gives you links everywhere. I've been writing for the Red Room, Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I just recently released a Shadow Dark zine called The Living Darkness Volume 1. You can find that on Drive-Thru. I just got approved for print on demand. I'm just waiting for the proof copies, so there'll be physical copies available. I've been gaming since 1987, 88, something like that. Run the gamut. I just really like this hobby a lot, and I like talking about all the different styles and techniques that game masters can use to make this really interesting, weird thing called the RPG happen at the table. On my YouTube channel, Friday nights, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. I have a live stream called The Second Watch where we talk about these sorts of things, my buddy Gary and I. I hope to see y'all in the chat tonight, next week, whenever. It's pretty laid back. We'll have a few drinks. Sometimes Gary and I yell at each other. It's all good.
Which makes the show more interesting, right? Now, before we even dive into the first, look, he got it right there in time. Before we even dive into the first question, I get to put up here. Thank you very much, Squirrel Hermit. You are awesome. Squirrel Hermit has been such an amazing supporter of the channel over the years. He's a good guy. Sent me an awesome book. So thank you very much. And he says, hit the primer button. Well, I'm going to hit the drink now button. And I didn't open up a new bottle. I'm going to keep using this one until somebody really requests another one. But this is American Honey whiskey. I don't know. My wife got it at the alcohol store. There we go. And it's kind of weak though. It's only it's only 71 proof. But hey, with a little dash of honey. So Squirrel Hermit, sir, this is to you. I don't know if I'm breaking YouTube's terms of service or something by drinking in the first minute of the show, but hey, it is what it is.
Well, considering Gary and I are usually drinking within the first few minutes of the show, I think you're going to be all right.
This is surprisingly good. It doesn't smell like honey, but when you drink it, the honey flavor comes out, and it's also smooth at the same time. I really like this one. It's kind of foo-foo, but I like it. All right, let's get to our first question. We're here to talk about games now. Thanks again, Squirrel Hermit. You are awesome, sir. So, Lord Mattias, when a table begins modifying games rules, what needs usually drive those changes? And how does a game master decide whether a customization is appropriate for the group or the setting?
Okay. Before I really answer that question, I do want to sort of make some clarifying distinctions. I said this once on your show, I think about a year ago, when we were talking about rules as written versus this topic, customizing. You have the rules as written concept, and then you have house rules, and then I make a distinction between house rules and homebrew. Mm-hmm. For me, rules as written is for new players, and that includes the game master. So if you brand spanking new to a system, you should read the book and play it as written so you can really start to understand how it works, and maybe after you play it for a little while, learn the whys, right? And then you can start looking at things like homebrew and house ruling. House rules are for the table, the particular idiosyncrasies of the table, the people gathered there. And for me, homebrew is for the GM. When the GM wants to present a particular setting or genre or something like that. So rules that kind of affect that, I would consider homebrew, and that's sort of for the GM. So what what do you consider for driving those changes? So for house ruling, those idiosyncrasies at the table, that's really, you're going to hate what I'm about to say, but it's about the fun. I know you hate that answer, but we're playing a game, and games are entertainment, and fun is your rubric, but you got to do more than just say, well, it wasn't fun. You really got to analyze it, right? So I think that if I may borrow from like some Supreme Court lingo, where there's smoke, there's fire. So if a rule is, if you're seeing players kind of grumbling about a rule, there may be an issue there. So I think you need to tease out whether it's they're just, you know, having some sour grapes that a ruling went against them or a rule goes against them versus something a little more fundamental. And I think, you know, this gets into, you know, your experience as a game master, because every table is going to be a little different. Some players are going to like harsh things or challenging rules or things that force them to think a certain way, while others may be a little bit more loosey goosey, right? Like maybe they're just beer and pretzel. They just want to show up, roll dice. They don't care if we're going to count every single square for, you know, walking distance or something. So I think that's like step 2. Step 1, make sure this is an actual gripe about something significant. Number 2, make sure you know who is at your table. And I think, you know, from there, you can used to start asking some questions like, is this rule change, this house rule, going to, I guess, meet the goals or the expectations of the players? Like, is this going to, in effect, make it more fun for them because of the way they're interacting with it currently? So, so again, so if you got war gamers, you know, changing a rule that may affect distance modifiers for like ranged combat or something, that might not actually be a good idea. You may like it. You may be like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. But you got a bunch of war gamers who that nitty gritty nuts and bolts like is part of the war game. That's probably not a good rule to change, even if you, the game master, don't like it. Whereas, like I said before, the beer and pretzels guys might be okay with it because like they just want to know, hey, can I hit that? You know, all right,
Uh-oh.
I rolled my 15 or whatever, right? So I think, oh, go ahead.
No,
Oh, it
you
sounded like
froze for a moment.
you wanted it.
That's what happened.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So, so by way of example, I was running a Lamentations campaign for about 3 years, and the first 9 months ish was pretty rules as written. Lamentations of the Flame Princess has a rule that if you start rummaging around your backpack in the middle of combat, you have to roll, I believe it's 3d6, and that's how many rounds it's going to take you to find whatever it is you're looking for. It's a deterrent, really, from you to like, oh, I'm going to, you know, pull out this whatever if you don't have it ready.
3d6 sounds like a lot, but I love the idea of the timer die. I use it a lot.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I like, and that kind of goes to something I'm going to get to in a minute. But if you're pulling something from your belt, let's say a dagger, a healing potion, maybe if you got it like or something on your bandolier, right? It's 1d3 plus 1 rounds before you get it. So my Lamentations game, and if you play Lamentations, you know, it's a pretty lethal system. You know, I started getting a lot of gripes. People are like, oh my God, this is just so punishing. And they brought up, you know, there were instances where they only had like 1 or 2 things in their backpack. So it's like, does it really take that long? You know, 15 rounds or whatever,
Right.
to grab that grappling hook next to the torch, you know? So, so we decided to house rule that. That was just too harsh for the table. Now I know people who would be like, okay with it. They'd be like, no, this is Lamentations. Like if you're not ready, you're not ready. You know, if that wasn't in your hand, you're not prepared for this encounter, that's on you.
How
But
long
you know,
is a round in Lamentation?
6 seconds. So it does make some sense. It does make some sense. It's not like completely, especially if you consider like you're taking off your backpack, you know, and all the while swords are swinging, monster claws are coming at you. You know, you're like, you know,
I would say some of these people were never in the military and taught how to make a mobility bag, but okay.
Oh, well, see, there you go. But see, that's like if you were at my table, that would be an excellent argument. Be like, hey, man, we need to change this because this doesn't make any sense for us, you know. So what I did was I basically just nixed that rule and everything was 1d3 plus 1. Okay. To me that balanced the rule It met the players' I guess expectations or satisfied their concerns, but didn't like break the game and make it so easy. Because there's nothing I hate where it's just like I'm gonna grab a potion and it all happens in one round. Like I said, like that there needs to, it just doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense on that side of things either. So when you're looking at a rule to house rule, you really need to understand like why it's there, and how it's going to affect, or how it affects the gameplay in the whatever situation that you're house ruling it. So in this particular situation, like I said, the 3d6 per round, or for 3d6 rounds to find something from your backpack in the middle of combat is a deterrent. It's kind of punishing, like you were not ready. So I didn't want to get rid of that entirely, because that's part of the game. That's part of the sort of vibe of Lamentations of the Flame Princess. But making it 1d3 plus 1 still gave it that deterrent. It's still it's still punishing, but my players were like cool with it. A good example that's rages across social media all the time is Death at Zero, right? And like a lot of players don't like that. Again, how do you address that? What is the vibe of the game? What's the point of Death at Zero versus death after like some bleeding out rule or something like that? So if you're going to add that to the game, make sure your players aren't just griping, like there's like a legitimate concern there. I think for example, the Death at Zero like arguments against it, you have someone who's got this 8th level character, they've been playing smart, they've been doing everything they can, like it almost seems too punishing, right? So maybe modifying Death at Zero would be a good idea for the table if everyone's all right with that. So I think I answered that question. Maybe not. I just think you really need to know who's at the table, the particular idiosyncrasies of the table for terms of house rules. For homebrew rules, though, because it's about the GM's world and the setting and the, I guess, story for the more narrative games, there's a little bit more leeway there. And I think the real issue there is, if you're going to homebrew something, make sure it ties into what it is that you're trying to achieve. So I was talking to someone who wants to take Shadow Dark and make it more like Call of Cthulhu. And I was like, oh, are you going to put in a sanity mechanic? He's like, oh, heck yeah. And then the next question is it going to be consistent with Shadow Dark? Like, how are you going to do that? Right. And that way it's easy for the players to grasp, because that's something that's not in the book. It's a homebrew thing that this totally new concept you're introducing. So if it's congruent, I think that's a good word to use, congruent with what's already written down, your homebrew is probably going to work, or at least is on the path of working, if that makes sense.
So real quickly to recap, Daniel, the main takeaways from before you got here is that know the rules first as to why, before you make house rules, update the rules, or I shouldn't say adjust the rules for the fun of your table if necessary based on the situation, and just kind of do it on a case-by-case basis. That's about as simple as I can make that without reiterating all the stuff that he said there. So now that he's
listening.
Okay.
I managed to listen on my phone while I was riding up here to finally get here. I would say this. I would like to draw a hard distinction between what is homebrew and what is house rules, rule zero, etc. All right. And that is, Lord Mattias kind of touched on this a little bit, but I make a real clear distinction. Homebrew is things that are explicitly created and tied into the setting or the campaign that is made by the game master. So it's not necessarily, oh, I'm doing rules different or I'm making a different ruling. It's, well, this class does or does not exist in this world. These races do or do not exist in this world. It's not, oh, I'm changing the way we handle pluses and minuses on the D20 or what type of action a certain thing counters, mechanical aspect. It's literally something along the lines of, there's a blade dancer class because it's part of some culture in my world versus there are no elves in this world.
Right.
And so I would say if you're talking rulings in homebrew, these are universal things that are right up at the beginning and across the whole board. And I almost don't think they really apply to the overall discussion of what the topic of the panel is tonight. Because it's not, oh, how I'm changing the rules. It's literally, I'm allowing this or I'm not allowing this. And it may even very well be a variant that's listed in the book. So
well, to be fair,
yeah.
I leave it general intentionally. So if you want to take it further like that, you can. Or as you were saying, if you don't think it should go that far, it doesn't have to. But I intentionally do leave it vague enough for people to talk about anything under the sun in terms of table modifications. But
absolutely. And I can see that as a modification. I can see it as, oh, I'm not allowed to play a tiefling, but tiefling's in the book. That's a modification. But when I think homebrew, that's what I think. I am, I think brewing the tea or brewing the stew. I'm making my world, and these are the things that are inherent in it.
Yeah. I think you and I are on the same page here. I think it's really just more like pedantic, like differences in terminology. Because I would actually say house rules are modifications.
Well, house rules
where homebrew is like additions. Yeah. Right. Like but by taking away tieflings, you are in a sense adding to the game because you're expressly stating, like you said, there are no tieflings here. And you're right, that is a type of homebrew rule, just like adding an insanity mechanic would be a homebrew rule to Shadow Dark.
I would like I said, I think you and I are very, very close on that agreement. I could even say, homebrew is additions and deletions that are to the entirety. Yeah. Whereas when you talk about house rules or Rule Zero, that's on a more base mechanical level. And as far as I look at it, I kind of look at it as three different levels of modification. You have modifications to the game, you have modifications to the world, and you have modifications that are based on the play style as a whole. And that's really what it comes down to, is that modifications are there to service a purpose, and they always should be there to service a purpose. And just like if you're going to play Cyberpunk, you are far better off picking up a Cyberpunk-based game than you are trying to just browbeat D&D 5e or Palladium or Rifts.
Ho. Hey, be careful there, sir.
Into it. Browbeat whatever
you're going to start something there,
into a Cyberpunk game. The same thing happens with like your homebrew rules, is you have a specific either style of play. We're more adventurers and dungeon crawlers, so we want to fast track anything that has to do with social interactions. We're not here to role play. We want to roll our charisma check and get our result. Or the opposite, we want to streamline our combat because we're trying to play our characters, and we're really about this great love interest we have back in town, and go into the goblin camp to get gold is just so we can buy flowers. You adjust those rules to streamline the game for the table that is playing to enhance whatever vibe, theme, genre, whatever.
Uh-oh. Now he froze.
Whatever. And that I think is important. Is just as important as selecting the correct system. And
I agree with that.
The problem I have with a lot of homebrew and a lot of house ruling is that it's done without purpose. It's done without a theme or an idea in mind. So when I played 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons when it first came out, and I loved it, one of the very first things I did was I decided that a keen weapon stacks with the improved critical feat. And oddly enough, 3.5 made that change official when it came out. The reason I made that change is because I said, this makes no sense. This breaks immersion for my players, because my players coming to me saying, I trained so much that I got very good with this weapon, and I have this extremely powerful magical weapon. why do these not stack? This is not logical. This breaks my immersion in the world because it doesn't make sense.
Because the game already has modifier bloat.
Well, that made sense. So I'm like, well, yeah, that's realistic. We're changing it. Versus somebody who maybe is like from a wargaming mindset who's like, well, you're making a sacrifice to get the additional expansion of your critical threat range, and you had to sacrifice something to get that. So it's a balancing mechanic to make our units, I'm sorry, not our units, our characters more balanced to the rest of the world. So it makes sense. So maybe they don't make that change. Neither one of those approaches to me are incorrect. Neither one's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you on that.
Yeah. What am I servicing? I am servicing a realistic world that makes sense. You are servicing a game that is balanced on a mechanical level. And that's really to me, that's really important when it comes to when we discuss about why are you making changes or what is the purpose of those change, is simply not making changes without first determining the reason why those changes are being made. And way too much happens in the modern TTRPG space where people turn around and say, I'm just going to make this change because it irritated me this one session.
Right. Yeah. Well, you basically said the same. That's why I say like the house rules are for the table, the idiosyncrasies of the table. Who are you gaming with? What is your table like trying to achieve? What is their fun? Is it role playing the flowers with the goblin, or is it the war game, right? Or whatever it is that they're doing. I completely agree with you on that. And I do think when you're assuming a GM, I'm not worried about whatever randos are doing because reasons, as you put it. But if you're a GM who wants to get better, right, you need to tease out like, is the gripe you're getting from your players them just having sour grapes because something didn't work out the way they thought it should, or is it something endemic to and conflicting with what the players are trying to achieve at that table, the war game experience, the heavy role play experience, the beer and pretzel experience, whatever it is, right? So I agree with you there. Yeah, I think our differences is really just mostly semantic, honestly. So but I do think house rules are less about adding to the game and more about modifying the existing rule. That's where I make that distinction: house rule versus homebrew. So,
well,
anyway.
let me just kind of add to this. I was going through your list of both of you guys there, going through there. You brought up good points about the homebrew and the GM and everything like that. But death at zero. Max had said something to the effect that if you got a 8th level character and then the 8th level character is knocked down and it's just barely over a scratch, that would be something that I would consider a modification to, because that person's put in that time to have the 8th level character. D&D in 2nd edition was horrible about that. You hit 0, you're done type situation. And that's something that you could modify at the table, saying, you know what, if you can get over there and stop that bleeding, if you can do that, that's a modification that as a DM that I would get over there and just go ahead and do. When you were talking about the modification to the game setting, to the world and everything like that. Also, are you going to modify the rules for the player class? We were talking, you guys were talking about modification to the players. Is that something that you would allow? I personally allows a certain amount of modification, because this is the character that they're ultimately going to play through the whole thing, and as long as it's not disturbing or destructive to the game, then a slight modification. If the paladin wants to have a big cross instead of a small cross, little modifications to kind of help the setting along, I don't see any problems with that in there. So there's just a couple points I wanted to kind of throw in while you guys were talking there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when you're playing in like an OSR game where there's like the ruling over rules is sort of part and parcel of the gameplay, the house rule issue can become potentially problematic, because at that point you need to start thinking about consistency, right? Like, because you just said, right, you have, let's say hypothetically, up until that 8th level character became 8th level, the gameplay had been pretty brutal, gritty. People are dying at level 0, and then finally you have a couple people make it, right? No, I'm sorry, not level 0, 0 hit points. And finally someone makes it to level 8, or a couple of them, and then that guy like hits, and then you then bring that up. That might be time for a conversation, right? Like, because at that point, especially if I'm the guy with the level 4 character, because I've lost like 3 or 4 of them at this point, I might be like, wait a minute, you know. So consistency, I think, is key too, because that just goes towards your credibility as a game master, you know, and your judiciousness, you know. But yeah, no, I agree. But like that's where, you know, those ruling over rules and house rules, and I know this is probably actually gets to a later segment, but I'll just say it now. You know, at the end of the day, you're getting together with your friends. If you make a house rule that does, or a homebrew that doesn't work, I see no problem saying, "Hey guys, you know, for the past couple sessions we've been doing this thing. I don't think it's working. Maybe we should change it back or do something different." You know, so.
Well, you have to look at homebrew in this fashion. Everybody here, I think, knows that by and large, I'm a 3.5 guy when it comes to D&D. I think 3.5 is far and away the best D&D system, hands down.
You're just trying to get kicked off the panel, aren't you?
As a game. Yeah. But the reason one of the big things I love about 3.5 is a very game master forward system. It strove to give the game master the most tools possible to build their game for their table. All right. So you pick the rules, you go through it, and, you know, even right in the Dungeon Master's Guide of 3.5, it explicitly tells you there are variants listed in these rule books for a reason, because you are supposed to pick and choose the ones that best fit the type of game you are trying to run for your table. And maybe the next game you run, even for the same table, you make some other modifications to fit those things. And it's almost like, if you ever remember the old video game, it was like RPG Designer, and it was like you get to make your own RPG right here on the PlayStation. And you could pick all your different stuff to try and make your own RPG. It's kind of the same thing. But what is one thing that is a key part of developing any game that's important? It's playtesting. Well, if I'm doing a homebrew system, like if I've got some mechanic that I think, from all the thought that I put into it, even if I've really, really dug into it and, you know, run simulations and all kinds of other stuff, I think this mechanic is going to be great for my table, and it's going to promote this particular kind of feeling, this particular kind of pressure on my players. And I think it's going to be great. And we start doing it. Well, this is the first time we've turned it out in the wild. This is the first time it's been play tested. And it doesn't work the way I thought it would. Yes, you absolutely needed to be able to turn back and say, hey, look, guys, I thought that adding this weird add a D10, subtract a D10 on, you know, natural ones and natural 20s mechanic was going to be really expansive and do a lot of cool stuff to our table here. But turns out that it almost never happens. And when it does, it just screws everything up. So maybe we should just go ahead and throw that away. Is everybody okay with that? And you're doing this out of session. You're doing this on the meta level with the players, not dealing with the characters, not dealing with a situation in game. You're not disrupting their immersion in the game because it's entirely happening outside of it. And yeah, you absolutely should be able to go back and say, look, particularly on a mechanical basis, we need to make this change. Where it gives you a little bit of a difference is when you cross into what I was calling homebrew. If I've made a class and it turns out I screwed it up, now you got a big deal because somebody's bought into something that's part of my world that I brought in specifically for this game to be part of this universe. and I'm the one who goofed up and gave it too many pluses or too many minuses and turned it into an absolute monster. Now you've got a little bit more of an issue than something as simple as like I added an insanity mechanic that I need to make some adjustments to.
Yeah, I think definitely in that situation, that would be an ongoing conversation you'd have with that player, right? Give them the heads up, like, you know, and this is with any house rule or homebrew, you're in effect play testing it the moment, whether it's at the beginning of the game, so-called rule 0, or something that you modify later on as you see people griping about something. You are in effect play testing thereafter, right? So I think there definitely needs to be an understanding by everyone at the table that, you know, this could be permanent. It might need to be tweaked later on down the road if it doesn't work out the way we think it's going to work out, or the way I think it's going to work out. Hopefully your players, because, you know, like I would say like 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, we're playing with the same player group, right? So it shouldn't be too much of a problem to say, hey, you know, we're all friends here. I'm just trying to make sure we have a good game. Don't get mad if I tweak a rule. But yeah, I think definitely communicating you know, issues as they're coming up with something you've homebrewed. But yeah, you're right. If you're going to add something that dramatic, I think you might almost want to advertise it to your player base by player group by saying, hey, I got this new thing and it's supposed to be about this, like, whatever it is, this cult in my world, and you can be a member and this is what you got to do. But or you could play this character class, but hey, if anyone takes it, we're gonna have to talk and see how this ends up playing out. So yeah.
Sorry about that, Lord Matty. So I was playing with a new feature here in StreamYard, and I thought it would actually push to YouTube. No, just cover your face. That's it.
I started doing this, and that's when it popped up, and I was like, oh, did I do that?
No.
Can I do that?
No, I created a poll, and apparently it doesn't push to YouTube. It's just on the screen here. So I'll recreate it here in just a second, but I want to show off the new feature. I can't read that, by the way, but I can read what I so what is your house rule or homebrew method? You can think about this, YouTube folks, because I'll put it on YouTube in just a moment here. But number 1 is do it raw, baby. That means your only rules is written. There's no such thing as a house rule. As needed after, you know, the rules fail. Yeah, when the whim hits. Or your game is just one big house rule. So we'll oh, actually I can put that up here. Oh, look at that. It doesn't cover anybody.
You're not covered Lord Mattias anymore.
Yeah, but I can't, nobody can vote. Like, I want people to actually click a voting button. So that's just weird. What's this options here? Reset, duplicate, delete right now. Just anywho, I'll leave that up for a moment.
2.5.
2.5. Well, it only allows 4. I had to find, you know, the extreme ends and the ones in the middle. Anyway, go ahead. We got just a couple more minutes left in this segment here. So while I'm creating this poll, I'll let you guys finish up the conversation here. What I do want to follow up with real quickly, though, is so have we discussed what needs drive the changes? I think, you know, we've hit on some topics there, but just in case you haven't said everything you want to say on that, what needs drive, you know, a house rule or homebrew? And then how does a game master decide whether it's actually appropriate for the group or the setting? So as long as we've answered those, we've hit this topic. If not, go ahead and add a couple.
I think we have, you know, the idiosyncrasies of the table, what kind of players they are, what experience you and they and the whole table is hoping to get out of the game, right? And we've talked about, you know, making a distinction between players just griping things aren't going the way they want versus something that really should be looked at. So, and then the distinction between house rules and homebrew, that wonderfully pedantic debate Dan and I had. So yeah, I think we hit them all. I don't know. I would say, though, based on your poll, I'm kind of a number 2, except I wouldn't say when raw fails, when raw has served its purpose.
Well, I'm still saying fails because it's already typed up.
I'm a 2.5 person myself on that. And I would say the big thing about any kind of homebrew or any kind of house rule, whatever you want to call it, it should serve the game first, the world second, and the players a very distant third. So the very first thing you want it to do is you want it to serve the game. Does it make the game run more smoothly? Does it make the game easier for the players to be immersed in? Does it provide more consistent, reliable verisimilitude in the results? So you're comparing, you're enhancing the game itself mechanically. That would be like something like my situation where I was like, we're stacking the keen weapon, the keen edge weapon, and the critical improved critical feats. Why it makes sense? It causes a disruption to everybody every time it comes up because it doesn't make sense. Serves the world second, something that is global, something that enhances the experience for the players. It enhances the setting. It enhances the way players interact with the world itself. And when I say serves the players last or serves the players third, I'm not saying, hey, we're throwing the players back to the end. I'm saying if it's serving something like players getting a little irritated about something, or a player being butthurt because something didn't go their way, or I'm not going to go back and change this thing that I screwed up and is totally busted because it's going to impact this one character and he's not going to like me making his character weaker, that's the distant third. My last consideration is how it impacts an individual player after how it impacts my game world and how it impacts the overall mechanical gameplay for the entire table.
Yeah. Again, I think we're you and I are basically in agreement on that. Just we're just expressing it slightly differently, because I would say impacts the game is dependent upon how the players are reacting to it. So I wouldn't necessarily put them into a distant third. It's just first identify it and then ask the question: are you griping, or is this something we need to take a look at? So, but yeah,
I would agree with Lord Mattis on that one. You're not that I'm trying to argue with Daniel or anything like that. It's just, the players are the reason that we're doing it. I mean, it's part of the situation. And when you do a customization on a rule, the rules got to work for the DM and the players. Everything's got to line out. And at the end of the day, at our tables, we all have to have fun. And keeping it flowing, keeping it good, and as long as the modification doesn't hurt anybody or hurt the game, then I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where I would say is like if it's something that's like causing an issue for your entire table for all of your players, that raises it to the level of something that is impacting the game, which is the first concern. Yeah, whereas if it's you're taking away my toy, it's impacting that one player. It's like, yeah, I'm taking away your toy because it's making the world feel disjointed for everybody else. It's disrupting the game because we goofed up and made you too powerful or too weak. So let's be fair, no player is going to complain that their character is too weak.
Too powerful.
It doesn't need to be more powerful. But
yeah.
I would say that once you start getting into something where all of the players have a concern with it, you've risen to the level of something that has impacted the game.
Yep.
All right, then. Well, let's get ready to jump into segment 2. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to all the panelist channels. So what do we have? We have a couple of YouTube channels. We got, what was your tiny year? Oh, that was to your,
that's to my book. I have a
book,
YouTube channel. I need to be over 1,000 subscribers, but I'd much rather sell books.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, especially right now, since books would make you money, and it'd take you about another 200 subscribers to make money over there.
Well, more importantly than that is that books will make all the fine people who pitched in to write my book, because it's an anthology. There are 5 other authors that would like to make money off of that, and artists who would love for a volume 2 to have money to make art for.
Fair enough. So, all the links to where you can find these fine folks are in the description. Your support helps keep the conversation going, reach more tabletop RPG fans. If you notice, we're starting to get a few new people on. I think for like the last month now, we've had at least one new person each week. That's awesome. Hope we can continue to do that. So we may be looking for a panelist like you. I need one of those Uncle Sam posters. We need you. Sign up on the GMI Discord, link in the description, read the rules, and find a panel topic that interests you. Coming up soon in segment 2, our panelists will discuss balancing innovation and compatibility. However, before we do that, let's take a look at your super chats and member comments. So, starting from the beginning here, booyah, we have a new member there. Thank you, Sly Blue Demon. We also have G-Funk Rescue Crew. I read that wrong when I first saw the name. I was like, what? G-Funk Reese Crew? What is that? No, but it's Rescue Crew. So thank you very much for becoming a member. And Poly Robotics is a member as well. Awesome. Thank you very much, folks, for that. Squirrel Hermit, of course, with his $50 for one more time. We'll put that up there. I already drank for those who missed it. So I actually like that whiskey. You know, if you want to make me drink that a couple more times, I won't argue too much unless I get drunk. I can't do that because these guys would hate me if that happened. Moving on. Full Metal Dragon says, if an RPG needs house rules, it was made badly. What do you guys think?
That's
No,
BS.
not necessarily.
No.
Okay, well,
Not
we'll start with Lord Mattias on this because it's still his segment. So, and then we'll go across. Lord Mattias, what are your thoughts then?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, no, because again, as we've been saying, like house rules are about the player table idiosyncrasies. Like, I don't think Adventure Conquer King system is made bad if my players are like, can we not do the economics? Can we leave that out and just dungeon crawl with this system? You know, I'm not going to tell Alexander McCrease that, hey, you screwed up because my players don't want to use your rules, like your economics rules. You know what I mean? I just don't necessarily agree with that. Now, I do think some systems are better at house ruling than others. Like if my friend who really likes spreadsheets came to me and said, hey, Acts 2 is really cool. I got a better way to do the economic system. I would look at him and go, well, why don't you go run your own Acts 2 game? Because we're not doing that here. You know, I don't want to mess with that. But like BX, you know, any OSR system. I know Kepler, you were talking a little bit about Savage Worlds. I've never played it. I've read a little bit here and there. It looks interesting. But I think you mentioned something about...
Well, we are going to address that in the second segment.
Oh, okay. Well,
at least I hope we are, because that's kind of what the point of it was to some degree.
So, but yeah, that's my opinion. I don't think it necessarily means they were made bad.
All right, Driving Drag. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's absolute BS. That's nonsense that comes from a dogmatic perspective, if you ask me. The simple fact of the matter is, every single RPG that has been written within the, you know, prior to the last 5 years where this became a dogma situation where people started tribalizing over it, they all have some version of Rule Zero written directly into the rules text. And it is there for a reason. And that is because this is not a computer game. You do not have defined limits on who you're allowed to talk to, where you're allowed to go, or what actions you're allowed to take interacting with that person. And therefore, unless your rule book can fill that entire bookshelf plus back there, you cannot actually have rules as written for everything that needs to be done there. And therefore, you must be able to adjust it to make it function for the game you are running and the table that you have. You have to have it. It is not optional.
For the record, I went through training for a game that has a 5,000-page rule book, and it still doesn't cover everything that can be done, or everything that somebody can think of. Yeah. So, and that's real. It's a wargaming tool used for the government. The game has been in development since the early 80s, and it has a 5,000-page rule book on, we'll just say, how to play war. And there's still things that people are like, ooh, it'd be really awesome if we could do this as well. You know, so
yeah. And that's the beauty of the RPG, of the tabletop and the pen and paper game, is that you have this massive, ultimately infinitely adaptable supercomputer called a human brain that runs the actual game and runs each individual player. So therefore, you have to have some way to adjudicate these things. Exactly. Now, you can adjudicate, say, something that commonly comes up with your players and your table by making a house rule, Or you can say, because it's not a rule that's in the book and it would be a badly made game if there's no rule for it, I can just individually adjudicate this every single time it comes up. And God forbid I am a tiny bit out of line with the way I did it time 1 versus time 5, and time 5 didn't go in the player's favor. Well, wait a minute. That's different than the way you did it last time. Why can't you do it the other time? It's much better to be like, hey, we're going to have this situation happen in this particular world or whatever far more often. So I went ahead and made a rule for it.
Right.
And Kepler, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts on it are pretty much in the same line with the guys here. I was noticing in chat they were talking about Monopoly. Well, you know, the best part of Monopoly is a homebrewed rule where you put money under free parking. You know, you can do that with your game. You know, I've been in several games where if you hit a certain number in the percentile, something epic happened that the DM would allow. That's not in the book. But, you know, if you hit, you know, like 1%, well, something epic would happen. And you can write those in because you're building fun at your table. You can build what you need to keep that next level over, whether, like he was saying, it's beer or pretzels, or if it's a hardcore, we're shooting a paladin mission all the way through. It can work to add just a little bit of levity or a little bit of the extra help that the DM wants to give to the player characters. So yeah, I would agree that house rules can be fun just as long as they're not strangling or just at the GM's whim.
Can I just say something real quick on the Monopoly thing real quick? Because I find that to be one of the most disingenuous garbage arguments that people bring up when they want to harp on Raw. All right, even a war game, but Monopoly is a competitive game. Therefore, we must sacrifice that flexibility in order to ensure a level playing field for all players because it is competitive. This is not a competitive game.
Right.
So therefore, we don't have to make that sacrifice. We only make it because we have to have a level playing field. So you're basically saying that what we should be doing is making a sacrifice for sacrifice's sake, as opposed to for any actual reason.
That's a really good point, Dan. That's a really good point. One that I've never thought of. It's why I love these panels. I always learn something new. It's fantastic. That's a really good point.
I know all this going in. What are you talking about? I've never learned anything on these panels. I'm just, oh yeah, you're just saying the same thing. No.
Yeah, because
somebody in chat's going to say I'm just being pedantic about Monopoly rules because they don't understand concepts. They have to focus on pens.
Let's not rehash that one, please. I forgot about that.
And what I was saying there is, as I was just using that as an example. I mean, that rule in itself, along with the free parking. Yeah, I understand the whole concept, what you're saying, the Monopoly and stuff. But it's still an equal thing, but it adds an element of chance, which adds just a little bit for whoever's sitting around the board with you. It's just something fun that you can throw in there. Most players agree with it. You know, that's when you do a house rule of some type, it needs to be something that everybody can get on board with. That was the point that I was saying.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I wasn't responding to your point about
something in chat.
Just the fact that people bring up Monopoly on a regular basis. Because if you want to get into the nitty gritty of Monopoly, what really wrecks Monopoly is that nobody does the auction rule. Technically, in Monopoly, if you land on unowned property and you choose not to buy it, it's supposed to go up to auction for all players to ensure properties get bought more quickly and more quickly fill the board and make the game go faster. But for whatever reason, nobody does that.
As a side note, if you want to see me get really sick on a live stream, I played Monopoly against Heathen Dog, and it was online Monopoly. And every time that I owed him money, I had to eat one of those Harry Potter Bernie bottles, whatever they're called, beans that taste like sweat socks and whatever other nonsense out there. Oh. And you can actually see the moment I break, where it's just like, I'm done. I quit. I'm trying to drink
Cool.
vodka after that straight. It wasn't helping at all. Anyway, I don't know what it's called on the Legion Myth YouTube channel, and it may even only be for members at this point. I don't know, but look up something about Monopoly on there, and you might find that one. It's a long video, but I'm sure you can find the most watch where I get where I finally had enough, and I just gave him the game like. Whatever, dude. Here, have my money. Yeah, you another dumb bean. Whatever. I'm done. I'm out. I quit.
Make it 10. Hey, make a little like 5-minute edit. Rename it Vodka and Sweaty Socks. It's gonna be,
dude. Yeah, you'll go viral.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should go do that.
Yeah, you'll go viral.
I do have fail videos also from back in the old video game days. I do have 2 fail videos that I think also are public, but again, might be members only. You can find it's fail 1 and fail 2, and yeah, there you go. So there is some of that out there. But anyway, let's stay on topic here because I'm pushing this time frame now. So that was we had one more chat that I wanted to get to. Michael Risk says, what would you call adding additional refinement to current existing rules from other games? I call them house rules, but they are more optional rules than this is how the game works now.
Well, I would say that's house ruling, but again, I guess it depends on your aim. Like if it's to appeal to what the players, the table wants, like, oh, hey, we're just trying to have a beer and pretzels game, and you're adding this thing, I would call it a house rule. But if it's something that goes towards setting or genre to help like make a horror game feel horror, or I should say a horror campaign feel like a horror game or whatever, like Dark Sun or whatever, and you're adding that to sort of like make the setting pop and come alive, I call it homebrew. But I think it's totally acceptable to do. In fact, I saw an interesting exchange on X today. I'm not going to name names because it was related to another group, but they said this guy said, hey, house ruling, actually, I have all these other game books that have all these great ideas in it. Why wouldn't I pull from them to add to my current game, especially if I can make it work and everyone is having fun when I do it. So I think that's perfectly acceptable. And in fact, that's what you should be doing. Refining the tool, the rule. In fact, going back to my example of the ruffling around in the bag, that's kind of like a refinement based off of like what my players were reacting to. They didn't think 3d6 6-second rounds rifling through a bag to get out a single torch in the middle of combat made sense. But 1d3 plus 1 rounds did, and it totally solved the problem we were having. So
I do greatly appreciate you not mentioning my comment section, because that's where that came from. Yeah,
was that from you?
But yes, that came from my comment section, from people talking about Rule 0 in my comment section.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well. I'm just trying to avoid controversy. That's all.
But anyway, yeah, don't mention me. Nobody subscribed to me. We don't want to give him any traffic. But anyway, I would say this is like it falls somewhere between a variant and homebrew to make those tweaks. It is really homebrew at the end of the day. I come from a 3.5 mindset. Variants were the rule of the day in 3.5. Just about every single rule, even in the core rule books, has a sidebar that says, hey, here's critical hits. Here's a softer critical hit variant. Here's a more lethal critical hit variant. Here's a more lethal dying variant. Here's a harsher dying variant. And I almost like to call those little minor tweaks just variant rules, not even necessarily to the level of homebrew. All I'm doing is interpreting a different way to use a rule that already exists. But yeah, I don't think it's possible to play these games well with any kind of enduring campaign if you're not polishing them and making those minute adjustments to get that. And in the car racing world, everything is about tenths of a second. It's about how can I say, you'll watch qualifying in an F1 race, you're like, oh, well, his tire barely spun a quarter of a rotation coming out of that turn. That's going to cost him 100th of a second. That might drop him from 1st to 5th position on this qualifying run. That's what a GM does, is finds that 100th of a second in the game rules to make that game go from a fun game to an excellent game. And if you're not doing that, you may as well not even be on the racetrack.
Okay. I really like that analogy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Hey, Kepler, any thoughts on the question? I can put it back up if you want here.
What
would you call adding refinements, yada yada?
I like what Daniel was saying there. It is a polishing and using those little bits of additions, and even if a player character brings it forward, it helps refine and put your table together. You're holding everything together. So if a player comes with a little bit of an idea, or even if the GM has an idea, you are making it a cohesive structure. For a lack of a better term, you're adding two parts to the epoxy, and you're making a strong game. So I would agree with most everything that they said.
One of the things I do want to mention for chat as we go forward here, and maybe this is a fault with me and how the questions came up, the topic came up. Personally, and I don't care how they answer the questions. They answer the questions however they want to answer the questions. But this isn't a discussion on the difference between homebrew and house rule. In fact, you can kind of throw those terms out. The idea of the conversation is any sort of table modification that you make, whether you define it as a house rule or a or homebrew or whatever ruling at the time, a rule of cool, rule zero, whatever you happen to call it. That's really what this is about. It's just about any adjustments that you make, and the definition itself doesn't matter for the purpose of what we're asking. Now, if they want to talk about the definitions because it's important for the aspect of the question, that's fine. I'm just saying for general purpose here, we're not trying to parse what the difference between a house rule and a homebrew is. We're just trying to talk about, hey, when do you do this and why do you do this? So, all right. Well, let's move on to our next segment, which covers balancing innovation. I probably should have updated that terminology, and compatibility. And we will meet our second panelist, Mr. Late, Daniel. Well, who are you? What content do you create? And what is your tabletop RPG experience?
Who am I? I'm Late. I'm Daniel.
You're changing your name to
that. I run Driving and Dragons. It is a YouTube channel where every Monday I mock the fact that we overreact and have outsized reactions to stuff in this hobby called intelligence as a dump stat. It is literally me overreacting to things people say that I think are stupid in the hobby. And other than that, I do a lot of gaming theorizing and discussion on that channel. And I also am the publisher of the Corvid Codex, which is a modern pulp anthology series that Volume 1 is out on Lulu right now. Volume 2 will be out July 1st. Planning on doing it every 3 months. A lot of people that you are probably fans with, or interact with on X or other social media or Discord are my writers, my artists, and all that fun stuff. So go out and support them if you like those kind of stories. Matter of fact, right here, got my proof copy.
There we go. Look at that.
Nice, shiny, high gloss, 6x9 trade paperback. Looking all kinds of good in there.
Awesome. Yeah, check out the link again. All their links are in the description, so make sure you check that out. And I know folks like to read. We still read. Some of us are still old. We like books. So
yeah. I do think we do have a lack of a true raw militant person on the panel in a way. That is, I think, the one thing we're really missing is that we don't have a super militant rules is written person.
I tried. I really did try to get somebody on like that, but it is what it is. I can only, people don't want to be here. People don't want to be here. But let me ask you the second question here so we can jump on in. When you create or adopt a house rule, how do you weigh the value of a custom solution against the risks of things like balance issues or player confusion or broken expectations or surprise, I just changed everything you thought about the game on you at the last second, or if you run modules, reduce compatibility with published material. How do you weigh all of that, if you even weigh all of that?
Well, first off, I try to think of everything as much as I can in advance. I don't want to modify something that is already tested and effective unless I have to. I want it, and it really needs to service immersion, and it really needs to service people being able to get lost in the game better. I will say this. I do personally feel if I can modify something to limit dice rolling, it's generally a good idea. Just because I think if you can resolve something without a dice roll, it typically is more immersive. It's better for you to be able to get in there. But when it comes to like, what is my process or how do I think about it? I always try to keep my house ruling in the margins. If I'm making something big, like a custom class or a major change in the way a spell works or something, it's going to be tied directly to the world itself. And as a general rule, I do not care about balance in that respect. I don't care if it makes a spell wildly more powerful or wildly less powerful, or if it makes a character something that's stronger or weaker in that regard, as long as it fits in the world and it narratively brings the people more into their character. If the player is more involved in their character, I really don't give a rat's ass about balance. However, when it comes to mechanical adjustments, it's fine tuning. Don't go make giant changes. Make small changes and try to make them universal. And then you can adjust as you go along. That's really what it comes down to when it comes to homebrewing. Most of your homebrewing problems come from somebody who goes in and makes a radical change without thinking it through, without paying attention to how it plugs in, or without even bothering to read the damn books to find out if there's already something in place to handle the situation. Where I do agree with the raw crowd is you should know your rule book before you start changing it. You don't change the gumbo recipe until you understand what each component of it does.
You guys want
to?
Kepler looked like you were going to say something. Go for it.
Yeah. Look, let me say something here. So, situation is which we'll get into a little bit when we get into the third segment. But as it is from my background in gaming and everything like that, I don't have access to. Let's just take Palladium for example, because there's 5,000 books, what it seems to be, of Palladium.
5,000 awesome books, folks.
They are awesome. Every one of them is awesome. I love all of them that I have. But as far as it is, if you're just playing with the rule book and an issue comes up, the DM or the GM has to make a call while it's going on, and it can eventually become a house rule. Now, later on, when they get another book that actually talks about it, or a Rifter or something like that, then you can change it back. But, my personal thoughts is you use what you got at the table. And if you have to adjust it, then you need to adjust it. So that was just my 2 cents on the whole thing. So.
Yeah. I think, well, number one, starting with an understanding of the raw is key. Someone said once, hey, I'm going to assume that the author, didn't make a mistake when he made this rule set, and that's why we're going to play it raw, right? And they're going to have an interesting and good time doing it. And I completely agree with that, right? But once you've played that game 100 times, 200 times, 300 times, 400 times, et cetera, you're going to start seeing the why and how these rules work with each other and what they're supposed to be doing. And at that point, you can kind of go to the next level of thinking, of create and start actually creating. And that's where you want to start with. You're going to start homebrewing or house ruling. And again, I'm being somewhat pedantic because I do have very specific meanings for those. But I think where I start is, and it's interesting, this is where I kind of disagree with Daniel here. I start with the consistency of the rule set when I'm house ruling. Why you first understanding why is that rule in place? Again, going back to that backpack issue. Well, the rules in place to act as a deterrent and to add some realism and threat to combat. You are literally swinging swords at each other, and you're saying, wait a minute, I'm going to open up my backpack here, which involves you putting down your sword, putting down your shield, and all this stuff. So it does act as a deterrent. So understanding that, I think, is key, and that will help you move into the right direction for house ruling, whatever it is you're going to house rule. And I'm also going to raise KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I think if you start adding complexity, especially when it's a house rule, a modification to an existing rule or set of rules, you're going to run into you're more likely to run into problems. So again, going back to that backpack example, there was already a rule in place for grabbing things from your belt, 1d3 plus 1 rounds. All I did was just say, you know what, that covers both grabbing from your belt and grabbing from your backpack. Everyone was happy, didn't break the game at all, still acted as a deterrent, still was dangerous to stop fighting in the middle of combat to grab something, So I think consistency with the original rule set for modification rules is critical, and try to keep it simple. Don't get too crazy with it. When you start, think of it like a sentence, like if X happens, then Y happens, right? If this happens, then you apply this rule. If you put a comma at the end of that second clause and then add provided that Z, and if A, you're running into problems, right? So just keep it simple.
I'm not doing algebra in my games.
It's pure logic, man.
I think we're kind of in the same place there. It's one, yeah, you absolutely should understand the downstream effects, and this is just a rule for life, folks. Understanding the why of something is incredibly important before you go changing it, because the why gives you the guidance on what the proper change is. Like you say, the reason why the backpack thing is in there is because it's a deterrent for you digging around in your backpack, and it also prevents me from having 19 weapons in my backpack and saying, oh, well, here's the enemy that has a weakness to bludgeoning, so let me pull out my mace. Well, wait a minute, that guy over there, it's piercing, so let me get my rapier out of my bag. And so you understand the why. That allows you to make the adjustment to ensure that the impact is in line with what it should be. And the other thing that you think about, and this has to do with whether you're designing a game, running a game, house ruling, whatever you want to call it, or whatever you're doing. Everything in these games is an abstraction. And what you abstract and how abstract it is going to change based on the game. Your bag rule may not matter for a lot of groups because it just doesn't ever come up. It's not really that big of a deal. So it doesn't need to be changed or house ruled. And in the one situation that does, it actually does feel like it has the appropriate weight because it really needed to happen and it had a really big cost. However, if we get into a situation where going into your bag is every other action thing because of the nature of the campaign, the environment you put them in or something, now it becomes tedious, boring, and overly punitive to hit them for this 3d6 rounds every single time they touch their bag. And it needs to be adjusted because we have gone from where this needs to be this abstract to this needs to be this abstract. And we have to narrow that down and become more focused and refined. And we do that by making Rule 0 modifications, rulings in the fact of the game, and by making house rules and other adjustments to the way we mechanically operate our game.
Yeah, and I would go, just on for me, the homebrew side of it, you have a little more leeway, but trying to keep it consistent with the original rule set, I still think is a good idea. So, like, if you're going to add that example of adding an insanity mechanic to Shadow Dark, Shadow Dark's already a simple system. And most, if not all, of the rulings that come off of that are based off the attributes, right? So if you created like an entirely new attribute, or just an entirely new sort of game mechanic, you might be drifting a little too far from Shadow Dark. Just tie it to wisdom or intelligence or charisma, whatever seems to make sense to you, and that'll make it easier for the players to read it and understand it, incorporate it as your little, as your homebrew. And again, it's simple and consistent. And now you have this cool insanity mechanic for your Call of Cthulhu. Well, we have to stick with the naming convention, so to be the Shadows of Cthulhu or the Call of the Darkness or whatever it is, right?
Okay. Well, to reference Lord Mathis there when he was talking about the gumbo, I believe it was him. Same principle with if I give you my chocolate chip cookie recipe, but then you put macadamia nuts in it, it's not the same cookie. Try it the chocolate chip cookie way before you add the macadamia nut type situation. Yeah. So I totally agree with that. But at the same time, like you guys said, you have to have the hardcore rules down. Be it you're playing with one book or you're playing with 10 books, you are the judge and the jury when it comes to the final call in the game, and you have to decide, am I going to go ahead and let this slide? Am I going to cut a little bit off this extra stuff there? So, but yeah.
You forgot a part. And executioner. That's my favorite part, is being a game master.
Very true.
All right. So we're still in segment 2. So I'm asking this question to Daniel to get him started up here. So where was the follow-up I actually wanted to ask? Oh, there's. I keep scrolling through my stuff here. Okay, I wanted to ask one of these. Maybe you guys answered it, and that's why I don't care anymore. Okay, I'll just do this one because I think this will be helpful for newer game masters. At what point does a clever or supposedly clever house rule, something that you guys needed for your table, stop being a helpful patch, so to speak, and start creating more problems or friction? Or, some people put in chat like that whole this is what I think about 3X, is that butterfly effect. You change something now and you don't realize that by level 9, you just blew up the game, So when does it start to cause problems?
Well, it's
starting with Driving Dragons for this one.
Largely, it starts to have an issue when you didn't think it through to start with, when you didn't ask yourself what the downstream effects were. It's really a upfront problem. Most of those problems do come up in a situational ruling, and I do think it's probably a good idea as a game master to say, I'm doing this, hey, here's the change, and making sure that it's pretty clear that, like, this was a situational ruling until I come up with something better, because I didn't want to disrupt the flow of the game. We needed an answer right then. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right answer. That's how I resolved it in that moment. This is not a house rule. This is not something that I've changed. This is a ruling that I made in the moment. When rulings that are made in the moment turn into house rules, you start having problems. But a lot of times it's when it comes from a whim. It's, man, I got a cool idea. I wish I could do this. And that's where you stop. You shouldn't do that. Yeah, this is a cool idea. What you should say is, I've got an awesome idea. How can I accomplish that? I'm going to go look for mechanics that are already adjacent to what I want to do. And then I'm going to slightly modify those. Unfortunately, a lot of them start with, I've got a cool idea. I'm going to make a new mechanic. And sometimes there's a mechanic for it that already exists that they just go look for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you haven't had the benefit of playtesting. You haven't had the benefit of a professional design team that was paid to write this module and think about it and spend several months in development before they plugged it into the game. You have the benefit of, you had a cool idea while you were laying in bed in your underwear with the lamp on before you turned it out for night, and you scribbled it down in your notebook and then plugged it into your game next week. So that's where the problem comes in. The problem comes in not asking the why, not understanding the mechanics to begin with, and starting with, the idea of cool idea as opposed to starting with the idea of how to implement or what is already similar to cool idea.
And I have an example of that, actually, that happened to me many years ago when I was playing 5e. And this is where I think there's a serious distinction, and you're kind of touching about between rule 0 and rule of cool. A lot of people tend to conflate the two, and I don't think they are the same. I had a player who wanted to play a priest who was really good with a staff, and he's like, at first level, he's like, he's telling me his character concept. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, whatever. And after a couple sessions, he's like, I'd really like my character to be able to do these things with the staff. And I'm like, sure, yeah, you could totally do that. And he was new to 5e, so I literally spent a little, like 20-30 minutes going through the different feats and that he could basically get for his character, and he'd be able to do it by level 3 or level 4. And I showed that to him. He was crestfallen because he was hoping I would rule of cool it and allow him to do it. But if I allowed him to do that, I would make all these feats completely irrelevant, and I'd make him way overpowered way too soon.
Quick question for you. Have you ever thought of, and I'm asking legitimately here, not acting like you did anything wrong. Have you ever thought of, like, you know what? That's an awesome idea. You pulled it out of your butt. The timing for this is good. I'm going to let you get by with this one time, but don't try this again until...
I got an example of that too. This is when I was a player, though. I wasn't the game master. A dude came up with another 5e game. He came up with some idea where he was going to, like, juggle his... It was really stupid, but he was going to juggle his hammer, his warhammer or something, to distract his opponent and then hit him in the head with it or something. And the game master, who considered himself a rule of cool game master, was like, oh yeah, that's great, go ahead, and he did it. Meanwhile, I'm going, well, I see problems coming down the pike right away, because the guy kind of wanted that to become like his shtick, and he wanted to use it over and over and over again.
Yep.
And the game master had to then say, look, I allowed you to do it once. I can't let you do it a second time or third time or whatever, because it's just going to break the game. My attitude in that to answer your question is, I wouldn't allow it at all. Because
right. I was just curious.
Because a player's going to be like, well, because Dan seems very concerned about immersion. Well, like, if I allowed his player to do it once, right? If I allowed his character to do it once, he should be able to do it more than once, because it's like this thing that he's doing, right? So that's why I just wouldn't do it at all. If there's a mechanical way to do the thing that you want to do, then we do the mechanical way. Now, if there is no mechanical way, then we can talk about a house rule or a homebrew thing. So,
have you ever heard of a get in the truck moment? That expression, you ever heard of get in the truck moment?
I live north of the Mason-Dixon, so no, I've never heard that.
I go out to the gun range and I'm shooting my .45 handgun, and the guys next to me are slinging clay pigeons, shooting with a shotgun. And I tell the guy, I'm like, I'm sitting there shooting, and I'm like, hey man, sling up a clay. And he flings the clay up in the air, and I point my .45 up like this without looking, and I blow that thing out of the air. Then I immediately say, well, guys, that's good. I've had fun today. I'm done shooting for the day. I'm going to get in the truck and I'm going to get out of here, because there's no way in hell I'm ever going to do that again. All right. Players are perfectly capable of having a get in the truck moment where they juggled that hammer that one time that actually worked. But let's talk rule of cool for a second. What's the operative word? Cool. All right. That one time you pulled that crap off, yeah, that was cool. The second time, yeah, maybe. By the third or fourth time, it's just boring, and it's like, yeah,
exactly.
Whatever. You can stick your foot behind your head and take a whiskey shot with your hand hung behind your butt cheek or something like that. It's not cool anymore.
At the end of the segment.
It's just annoying, and you're trying to get this done anymore. So I could say that's the same with rule of cool. It's like, it ain't cool no more. So the rule of cool no longer applies, buddy. It ain't awesome no more. This is it's like watching those old animes or old Saturday morning cartoons where the first time you see He-Man hold the sword up and by the power of Grayskull and do his transformation, it's awesome. But if you're going back as an adult and having some nostalgia, and I'm going to watch some of these old He-Man episodes I loved as a kid, you're fast forwarding through that shit every single time. Transformation scene, get out of this crap.
Kepler, you wanted to jump in earlier. What is it that what were your thoughts?
They actually covered everything, but you know that we were talking about how that went along, and I'm old school. I'm still taking paper notes here, so.
Me too.
But you know, we can try to know everything from every angle, but stressing out the party, the players, and the GM about it. You know, when you get your GM stressed out about trying to make an instant call, like you know whether he's going to juggle the hammer over the head, and then whether he's going to do it, everything like that, the GM will actually end up projecting that stress on the rest of the party, which will bring the entire game down. I found, in my opinion, in doing that. And so it's okay to say, you know, that's a really cool idea. I'm going to give you a percentage to try it. It's going to be a low percentage, and if you pull it off, you may never pull it off again, like they were saying. But it still allows for the element of them trying it. But at the same time, if they drop that hammer on the head, then everybody still has a good laugh about it, you know, while it's going on. So,
and what I love
yeah,
about that is you said dice rolls, because I'm very pro dice roll. I love dice roll, meaningful dice rolls, you know. But so like, you know what? That's cool. To me, that adds to the rule. Cool. Like, all right, here's my percentile dice. I'm rolling. I got a 33. Oh, you needed a 20 alert. Damn it. Well, I tried. Hammer goes flying.
One of the things that my players absolutely enjoy, but absolutely hate at the same time is when I say roll a percent. And they absolutely are like, we know what that's about. Why is he rolling the percentile dial? What's he doing? And it's the same effect. It just it gives so much flavor to the game.
Mhm.
So
cool. All right, what are we looking at for time here? Okay, not too bad. I think I can. I don't want to do. Do any of you guys run modules?
I do. To
You
a
do?
certain
Okay.
extent, yeah.
In my
Well,
old age, busy modules actually keep things kind of easy for me. If I don't have
Okay,
time.
then I
more
will
than I
ask this
remember.
one. So how much weight do you give to compatibility when you're talking house rules or homebrew or whatever? Table rules, and we'll start with Daniel on this one because it's still a segment. How much weight do you give to compatibility with published adventures, supplements, you know, so on and so forth, and the future players versus the needs of the current campaign?
Well, I guess the way I use modules kind of plays into this quite a bit. If I'm running a module and I'm just running a module, 9 times out of 10, or maybe even 99 times out of 100, you're talking a one shot. You're talking, I'm running this module and then we're going to go on to something else. So that's going to be a situation where the homebrew rules and whatnot that are brought in are going to be module specific or very generic. So in other words, they're the kind of stuff that I would always do, such as, for instance, I'm a big fan of taking a D10, and on skill checks in 3.5, if you roll a 20 or if you roll a 1, you roll a D10 and you take that number, either negative or positive, to the roll. So 0 to 9. So you do get something for rolling a natural 20, but it's not automatic success or anything. That's generic. Or it's, hey, I'm going to do this, but it's because I'm fixing something I see as a material defect in a module or whatnot. Normally, I use modules largely either to instruct something specific for new players or as an idea mine. So I'm ripping pieces out of these modules and adjusting them to put them into my own work. I'm almost never actually running a module, with the sole exception of I do like to run 3 Days to Kill and the Tomb of Horrors, specifically to instruct players in how to run their characters, because they each provide different mindsets on a meta level for how the player should think as their character. And that really has nothing to do with the scope of what we're talking about in terms of the rules.
Okay. Lormadius, Kepler, what are your thoughts on house ruling and the weight you give in terms of published adventures and supplements and whatnot?
A lot of the modules I run are Lamentations of the Flame Princess modules, and they tend to already have something wild in them, which would be considered like a house rule or a homebrew. Yeah, one of the reasons why I like them so much, because it's like you have these very creative people like adding something to this BX engine, right? So when I'm running, whether it's a small pamphlet adventure to a larger adventure, I'm expecting something odd and different, and that's going to like challenge the players and me as a game master, if as far as adjudication is concerned. So that's already baked in, and I actually use modules for both one shots, but also like when I'm running sandboxes, just throwing them on the map. So I actually, it just saves me time. So I think modules are very helpful in that regard, and because I've been running a lot of OSR, Lamentation sort of being in that orbit. The house rules and the homebrew don't really affect too much because they're already taking into consideration the fundamental OSR BX rule set. So it hasn't really been a problem in terms of how the module, what I'm doing affects the module and vice versa. Now, if I was trying to take like something from Palladium and put it into a Lamentations game, in fact, this might actually be like a really cool Gonzo adventure where someone finds a glitter boy suit, right? So you have these guys in the 1600s going, what is that? Well, now that's going to take a little bit of work, right? Because I'm actually taking two different rule sets, but it hasn't really been much of a problem. If you're, again, keeping it consistent, simple, I don't think it's going to be too
bring mega damage into Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. One shot a greater red dragon or something, with your glitter boy boom gun. That'd be awesome. Anyway,
that would be cool for like some mythic place that's, behind like, a big desert or the ice wall, so to speak, where a lot of people can't get to, but there are rumors for that. Like, why has nobody ever captured that kingdom up there? And you come to find out that their golem or their magic knight or whatever is a glitter boy, and it's like, kaboom! All right, well, what happens when that glitter boy runs out of ammo?
And he just starts punching people, I guess. Who knows?
It's not going to punch a dragon, though. Anywho, Kepler, what are your thoughts?
So my thoughts on it is what Lord Mathis was saying there is when I do modules, I use that as a chance to either do a one shot like you're saying, but it also if you're doing it in the entire system of your world, you can use that system to reset the house rules each time. Because say let's take Palladium for example. If you leave Rifts and you rift out, you go to Wormwood, that's entirely different. So the same rules don't apply. Whatever you brought, just like you were saying with the glitter boy that shows up, well, that glitter boy is going to break down. It's going to run out of ammunition. You're going to end up using worms for armor and trying to figure that out. And then when you get that done and then go back to the world, you're going to eventually be naked. So it allows for a reset, in my opinion, on how the house rules come and go. You can move them and then change them accordingly. If you didn't like one, move them someplace that it changes without disturbing the flow of your game. So
I like using the whole Palladium thing. I like Robotech a little better for that because it has protoculture, and well, guess what? You're not recharging protoculture.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. All right. Well, let's I think we've knocked segment 2 out the best that we can. So what are we going to be doing next? Oh yeah, next is me promoting again. So don't forget to share the stream, tap the hype button, help us get this discussion trending because chat stopped. It's all up to you in the comment section at some point in the future to talk tell us your thoughts. I cannot talk. Maybe this is why everybody stopped watching. I can't talk. Tell us your thoughts about tonight's discussion so far. You or someone may make an amazing panelist. Apparently can talk better than me today. If you know that person, or if you are that person, sign up on the GMI Discord. Link is in the description. Read the rules, find a panel topic that interests you, and sign up. Segment 3, our panelists will talk about when to keep, drop, or revert a rule. Now, as always with segment 3, they've addressed some of this to some point, but we're going to wrap it up in a neat bow. I kind of like how these segments work. We introduce it to you, we hit the meat, and then we wrap it up in a bow, and we're going to do that for you guys in just a moment. But let's finish this segment with super chats and member comments. And, well, apparently, I did start a couple of things. Okay, there we go. Let's go up to here. First things first, we have Poly Robotics with $50. I guess I have to drink again. What is the best way to play Palladium books without a GM? How to do it solo mode? I don't have an answer for that because I don't do solo gaming, but they have oracles out there that I'm sure that would work. You guys do any solo gaming with oracles?
I'm
do
not a gaming.
Yeah.
And I own exactly one Palladium book that I just bought because I found it stuffed in the back of a shelf at a Second and Charles Penny a page sale.
What book is it?
Aliens and something or other.
Oh, Aliens Unlimited?
Yep, that's it.
Oh, cool. Okay. Actually, that's one of the books I do like. We can talk later because that book by itself, can you make a character out of that book? I think you need Heroes Unlimited to make a character still. I might be wrong though. It's funny. I covered it a couple years ago, but whatever. But
Yeah,
because it was $50, I will also drink, and then I'll let these guys jump in a moment. Thank you, Polyrobotics. I appreciate that. And this whiskey is for you. You guys are trying to get me drunk tonight. I love it. Go ahead. I heard somebody wanted to say something.
Yeah, I don't. I've experimented with solo gaming. I'm not a fan of it, and because to me, role playing games is like a group activity. It's a group sport. It's an excuse to get together with your friends, play make believe. Be creative and do wild things with with some dice. So, but there are if you're looking for a simple set of like Oracle solo rules, I would check out Solo Dark, Kelsey Dion's Shadow Dark solo rules. They're really straightforward. I don't know if they'd work for Palladium, but I mean, her game is just like, I mean, the brilliance of it is its simplicity. Excuse me, I'm getting tongue tied now. I haven't even started drinking yet. But yeah, I would check
Drink
out
more than everybody on stream, and somehow I'm not tongue tied.
Well, compared to me, I think you might be girthier. I'm just saying, you probably can hold it better. And remember, I was in the Air Force. We weren't taught to drink. We were taught to play golf. Where are we? And okay, yeah, let's hit this one. Michael Riss says, so assuming you've read the book, do you follow the rules literally as written, or follow the general feel of the rules, or how they intended them to be, even though literally it means something else? And this is an interesting question for me, because there used to be back in, we'll just say the Biggest Geekest days, if you guys remember that channel.
Yep.
Joe and I, we have a big disagreement on this one. And that's the idea of rules as intended versus rules as written. His mentality was, you can't know how they were intended because you're not the designers. You're not in the designer's brain. So you cannot know in any way, shape, or form how they're intended other than how they're written. And my response is like, well, if you use the English language properly, I can get a pretty good grasp of how it is, because I also know how to take things in context. But I'm overstating that, by the way, intentionally. Joe's a good guy. With that said, there are people out there who use the RAI over the RAW. And I think we have a panel on that later in the year, maybe, or did we already have it? No, I don't know. I think it's later in the year. Rules as intended versus rules as written at some point. So what are your guys' thoughts on the idea of rules? And who's segmented? We're still in Daniel. So rules as intended versus rules as written.
Well, I mean, you have RAW, rules as written, and RAI, rules as intelligent. Because that's what it is. Rules as intended is always superior in every single way and is the objectively proper way to do things. It is always better to go after the intent rather than the rule, because the rule, no matter what, I don't care how good you are or how smart you are or how prolific your game design team is. As Mike Tyson used to say, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. Or as the Army says, no plan survives contact with the enemy. In this case, the player base.
Also, the Marines say, embrace the suck.
Bingo, embrace the suck. Here's the thing. A rule is intended to provide a certain thing to the gaming table. It is far more important to provide the players with what was intended to be provided than it is to follow the rich scripture of somebody who may or may not have said it well, may not have put it in the right wording, or may not have been correct in what the actual consequences were going to be of following that. And at the end of the day, yeah, the idea of, well, how do you know what was intended? I know what was intended because I read more than just that one sentence. Because I have this thing called reading comprehension. I understand this thing called context. And I read that chapter in the beginning that says, here's what we're intending to do with this game, and here's what we're trying to provide to you. And then I can say, well, here's a rule. Does this provide this? Not very well, so maybe I should alter it so I get this, the thing that I was promised on the back of the tin. Rules as intended, 100%. If you're running raw over rules as intended, you're doing it wrong.
I beg to differ, sir.
Ooh, fight!
Yeah, here we go. I think the only way to find the rules as intended is to first play raw many times. I'm not going to put a number to it. So you can start understanding the why, because there is some truth to the argument that I can't know what was in the game designer's mind. I wasn't there. But for the ordinary language argument to be efficacious here, you have to first actually sort of see how these rules play out. So I don't agree that you can't know the intention, but in order to know the intention, you need to see how these rules play out, and to grasp the why. And then from there, when you sort of run into an ambiguity, well, rules as written, it leads to this, whatever this is, we'll call it X. But in all these other cases, it's been leading to Y, and Y makes more sense. That's when you probably bumped into rules as intended. And maybe that at that point you should interpret the rule the other way, if that makes sense. I just don't know if you can just right out of the gate, first time you play a game, know what's intended until you actually play it through. And this is where I give the raw guys a little bit of credit here, because they are right. Like, the game designer had a particular idea in mind, and if you play it, you're going to get an interesting experience. It might not be great for your table. You might not like it. Maybe you need to play a different game, whatever. Maybe you do like the game. And like I said earlier, the more you play it, the more you start to understand this sort of syntax, that mental unspoken gel amongst all the rules, so you can understand how they were made and the why they work the way they are and what they're supposed to do. And that's where you can start house ruling. That's where you can get to that next step of thought process and engage in creation. And I think that process will lead you to the intention behind the game, if that makes sense.
If I write a rule and the rule says don't piss on the electric fence, how many times do you need to run it to figure out the intent of the don't piss on the electric fence rule?
I mean, that can be fun.
I think one time you're going to know pretty well what the intent was.
Sure, but most of the time these arguments pop up when it's a more complicated rule where the outcome is ambiguous. Like, is this supposed to play this way or is it supposed to play this other way? That's really the when we have these debates. Like, is this what was intended? When there is that's what that question actually gets at. Like, this is ambiguous. What was intended? Well, strict language logic says, rules is written, we do this. Well, we can talk about interpretation, we do it this other way. And I know very few rule books that actually provide game designer commentary along with it, so you can kind of glean the intent. I'll give you an example. Tower of the Stargazer is a module by James Raggi. He wrote it for new players, new DMs. So there are these little box sections where he kind of explains, this may sound harsh, but think of how many steps, I think I'm quoting here directly, think how many steps it took your players to get to this point. They deserve to die. Okay. But most modules, most game books don't have that. So how are you going to understand the intent? Got to play it, and then you'll figure it out.
I just call it basic reasoning. I don't have to go do something to figure it out. All I have to do is think through it and use just very, very basic deductive reasoning of X follows Y follows Z, and yada, there I am, bingo.
Well,
A plus B equals Z.
I would argue that the game designer did the exact same thing. But if we run into this ambiguity, we see this a lot in the law, actually, with like interpretation, and there's lots of ink has been spilled. I mean, it's really amazing to me. The rules as written, rules as intended argument follows a lot of legal philosophy as well. It's very similar. Strictly speaking, I completely agree. A raw can lead to potentially absurd results, which should raise a question, right? A red flag, like, well, this looks absurd. Is this what was intended? And so, yeah, go through, take a look at what the common language and our understanding of words mean. But I also think your argument for why we should ignore the absurd result and go with the RAI result will be stronger once you've been playing that game to understand like all the other stuff, because a game is more than just this isolated rule, right? It's like a coherent web of things that are happening to try to present D&D or Palladium or whatever, right? So yeah, no, I think you need to play the game first. I really do, and before you could just start saying, like, you wouldn't agree. Let me ask you this: you wouldn't agree that the very first time you picked up Palladium Fantasy, and I'm using that specifically because you said you only own one book, picked up Palladium Fantasy, and you're like, I'm going to play this rules as intended. Like you agree you can't do that because you don't know anything about that game, right?
I don't agree with that. I agree that for the most part and for a lot of it, especially like running the core system, that I should actually run it that way. And that no, I have to run it to understand how it works. But I can read the book and interpret the intent through the context of how it's written. Unless you just hand me a straight up stock manual that has nothing but the straight up written rules and has no explanatory text period throughout the entire thing, which none of our rule books operate that way. I can glean what it's supposed to be doing from the context of that rule and how the other rules work. Now I can't do it. Open up to page 7 or 70, flip it open. Here's a rule. Do I need to change this? No, I have to actually be a student of them. However, I don't have to go do it to understand it.
Well, I will have to agree to disagree, but I will ask, how do you know that your interpretation is your interpretation or what was intended? I don't think you can know without actually doing it for a little while.
Just by reading the material that's available and applying context. I mean,
why
does a posi track rear end work, Lord Mattias? It just does.
Well, let me.
Ahead, but for a driver, like that's the right answer.
I think.
No, seriously, for somebody who's just driving it, that's the right answer. I don't care why it works. I just know it does.
Well, not to wade in too much and to further this anymore, but I've always found that being too legalistic pays a price in your game. So I have a situation here where I had to make a call, and I'm just going to tell this story real quick. I had to make a call because it said that the person was allowed to dodge as many incoming attacks as possible. And I looked at them and I said, well, that's really not possible because there's 19 incoming attacks from different sources. We're not the Matrix. Okay. I had to do that. Even by the raw or the letter of the law in the book, it says he's allowed to make a dodge for every one of them. It's still not functionally possible for the game because that person cannot bend that way that many times, having that many attacks coming to them. So when you get into stuff like that, that's where the benefit of knowing the rules is and saying, okay, really, we can't do that because that's just not going to be realistic no matter what kind of setting we're in. You can't dodge that many unless you are computer programmed and able to be Neo in the Matrix. So, I mean, just to kind of throw in my 2 cents in there like that, both you guys have awesome points when it came to it, but when it comes right down to it, you do have to know the rules, and you do have to not be so legalistic when the rules does. You as the game master have to know how to apply that kind of reason for an in the moment judgment. Now, from moving on, I made sure and this is again my personal story. I made sure to let them know and understand that you can apply that rule. If you have 3 attacks coming at you, I'm going to let you do that every time. You have 20 attacks, or there's incoming missile fire, or whatever it is, and it's coming from multiple attacks. I'm going to let you do that one time, dodge one, but if the other 3 hit, you can't dodge those because you can't get out of the way fast enough. So
I think
anyway,
that's actually the Palladium rule for mini missiles, if I remember. It's something, or maybe you can't dodge mini missiles at all. I don't know, but there's some
no,
rule like that. The Palladium nerds out there will correct me where I'm wrong, but there's actually like it's kind of baked into the game because it's like we're whooshing a whole ton of things at you. At some point here, you're not dodging because it's an area of effect saturation.
It's like a 50% off. Is you if you dodge it or you get out of the way enough, you still take like half of the damage. I believe is the way the rule was written. But
four missiles at once equals no dodge. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there you go. So.
All right. Well, we spent a lot of time on a super chat there, or on a chat. We got to get to the next segment. So it was a good comment. There was actually a really awesome other one that I wanted to ask, but we just do not have the time for it. So I have to move on. So thank you for the comments out there. Unfortunately, we are on kind of a time schedule here, and I want to make sure that Kepler gets to finally have his say on things here as we move into segment 3. So with that taken care of, let's meet our third panelist and our final questions, which asks about when to keep or drop or revert a rule. Again, they've mentioned this to some degree, but now we're going to focus, we're going to hone in on that. So let's meet Kepler. It's his first time on here. Thank you very much for being here. Who are you? What content do you create? What is your tabletop RPG experience?
I have a small YouTube channel. I just recently started it within the last year. My tabletop experience was when I was a teenager into my early 20s. I played a lot of D&D second edition or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and then Advanced Dungeons and Dragons the second edition. And then I had about a 20 to 22 year hiatus from playing any games. And after life has kind of calmed down, I decided to jump back into the world and found that so much had changed. And I picked up so much has changed. I mean, I'm learning day by day on everything. But I started with some Savage Worlds. I kind of like that. It gives you it's a little bit more free flowing type of system. It's fast, furious, and fun is their tagline. But it allows you a lot of leeway on that. And for me getting back into the system and warming up, that was great. But currently I'm running a Palladium series on my channel, and I'll get better at uploading stuff to it. But I got with, I believe the channel is Initiative Zero, and I started following them, and they've been instrumental in getting me on my way through that. So about that, that's where it is. Of course, they also led me to you guys over here, and you guys are all a wealth of knowledge. So it's an all around good experience for somebody that's returned into the game after 22 years. So, but
all right. Well, let's first of all, I've got to ask the question about. I'm hearing a knocking noise from somebody, and it stopped.
It's probably
it's probably my pen. I'll set the pen away.
It's coming through somebody. Yeah, it's coming through your microphone. If that's you, it's like knock. Like, what is
it's probably my busted ass chair.
What's that?
It was probably my busted ass office chair because I decided to shift around.
Well, fix it. Duct tape it. All right. Anyway, let's
need some grease. Where's my WD-40?
WD-40. There we go. All right, Kepler. This question is for you to start us off. What standards tell you that a house rule deserves to stay? It needs revision or should be removed entirely? And what outcomes have convinced you that returning to the original rule was either a setback, a necessary correction, or the best choice for the campaign? Now, before he answers this, because the question was like 3 miles long, I want to remind folks, because I have some people like, your questions are like forever long. Yes, they're intentionally vague because I don't know what his stance on something is. So because of that, I have to ask an open-ended question to give him the leeway to ask in terms of how he plays and how he does stuff. So, yeah. So basically, what standards tell you that needs to stay, needs revision, should be removed, and what has convinced you that returning to the original rule was either a setback, a necessary correction, or the best choice for the campaign?
So I kind of broke it down into three sections. Primarily, why I keep rules that have been house rated is the party has benefited from it. The game itself is benefiting from it. It is not destroying any of the effects. It's not taking away from it, and it also, greedily furthers the GM's goals in a way. It's able to help move things along in the direction I want. So if it follows those two criteria, I'm going to hold on to the rule. I drop rules or things like that if it disrupts the flow of the game. If we have to dig out a book or we have to do something, if I can't find it within the first 15 seconds of the game, it's really going to slow the flow down, because I know that current gaming status is I wish we could play 8 hours a day like in the old days when we were teenagers and stuff like that. But realistically, I get 2.5 hours with my players a week at the most. So it's got to flow for me. And if that house rule is a disruptive rule to that flow, I'm going to get rid of it. We're going to find another way around it, or even if we have to polish a set in stone rule to make it move faster. Let's see. If it makes it too unbalanced, like we've talked about it there, where he was saying that the paladin had the staff and he was trying to get the guy to or the player was trying to get him to overdo that to cause the game to him to get him one up. I'm going to get rid of that rule. I had a series of guys that ran paladins in Ravenloft, and they all wanted these little cool ideas. Well, one of them had an idea for, he wanted some stakes around his bandana of stakes, and he could pull it out and throw those, and then they would refill. Well, that was a cool idea, so we were able to do that. As the game went on and he started leveling up, it became progressively damaging to the game, something that I couldn't foresee being a young DM at the time, and you just had to get rid of it. So I had to find a way to bring that down. So, yeah, it worked great on Undead, but now it will no longer damage living people. So henchmen and things like that, I was able to either drop or modify that rule to better make the game flow and to still give the player some satisfaction, but get the game under control. The correction in making rules is sometimes when you do things on the fly, like the earlier example that I gave about that, sometimes you have to go back and say, okay, I have got to take this out. I've got to readjust this. That grenade didn't do 4d6. That grenade was supposed to only do 2d6, or, a small adjustment in that fact. Or, what, you draw your light sword, or I thought something was cool where somebody swung a sword one time but made it turn off and back on because it was interpretation was instantaneous. Well, it was cool as all get out because he could turn it on and back off as soon as that. But it also disrupted the game where whatever I threw in front of the person, he could no longer block, or it put it in over challenging and gave that person a little bit there. So when I make corrections, or when I drop, or when I keep things, it all has to fit in certain criteria. And you, as a game master, we really need to have that criteria laid out and talk with the gaming group, the particular gaming group that we're with. Because if you're playing a Dead Rain campaign, or a Rifts campaign, or a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, or Savage Rifts, each one of those are going to have different modifiers, and you're going to have to adjust the rules accordingly.
So let me follow up with that, because you mentioned Savage Worlds and Palladium specifically. I think D&D would be on the other end of the spectrum. Can a rule fail mechanically but still succeed because it supports cinematic play or character motivation, tone, if you're into that, whatever? Is there a way that it can fail mechanically but still succeed at the table because, for lack of a better term, the rule of cool?
You know, I had an interesting situation. Real cool. That actually happened with a Sword incident where they dispelled it and then redispelled it or brought it back because in as a cyber knight they're allowed instantaneous uh, activation. Well, I let it happen the first time because I'm like, man, that is awesome. They just went right through that sword, smashed right into their chest. Well, as I reviewed with other DMs and GMs through the thing, they said, yeah, that is awesome. But if you start doing it, they're going to start really having problems because that person's going to go through everything you put in front of it. It's almost like with a, you'd almost want to modify the carpet adhesion spell. It's way overpowered in my opinion. I mean, it's a cool spell. It you can get it at first level, but you can stick something to the ground that's would be considered something you'd take on at 5th level. They can just sit there and shoot at it from a distance or whatever.
Just remember,
it's going to have to color.
The enemy can do that as well.
Right, that's right. But if you're fighting, exactly. With the whole the Sixth Sense, I've been learning about that one there. That one, you almost, the way it's written is there is no shot that can come through that person because they sense it. Well, you almost have to be a bad person about it and say, okay, you got 6, 7, 8 targets aiming at you now. That really sucks to do for the person, but if you go by written rules, that's the way.
Yeah, that's one of those confusing rules, and I apologize for jumping in again, but we actually talked with Kevin about that at one of the earlier game, probably before we were even calling it Gamer Talk, and we brought it up, and I want to say, please don't quote me on this because I might be misremembering, but his thing is if somebody's outside that range, because there's a range to it, first of all, then it's not sensed. So sure, you sense the bullet coming in when it's just 100 meters. I'm just making up a number because I don't know what it is.
Sure.
But a bullet that's moving at 1,000 feet per second, or a laser that's moving at a speed of light, great. You know it. Oh, it just hit you.
Yes,
like there was some of that in there as well. So I hear what you're saying, and I don't know because to be fair, I don't run Rifts and I pull psionics out of TMNT when I run it, so I don't have those issues. But I'm just saying that that apparently that the reading of it isn't as clear as, going back to last segment, the intent of it sometimes.
Well, and that's why this section of questions did interest me so much is when you're playing Palladium systems, even though they have got so much content and everything, you still have to do a lot of polishing on those. When you're playing in Savage Worlds, it's expected that you have to polish certain things because you are running completely the rule of cool, in my opinion, the way they run.
Yeah, well, that's one of the mistakes that I think people make about Palladium, and I did it as well, is that Palladium is meant to be a framework. It's got a lot more rules than Savage Worlds, but it is meant to be a framework where people are always trying to hunt down every rule. In fact, one of the things Kevin has asked us not to do, and I don't mean this in a negative way, it's not interesting for him, is if you'll notice that on our shows, we don't ask him rule questions anymore. If I do, I slide one in right at the end because he's always of the mindset, just do what works for your table. Why is this an issue? I don't care how you run it. Like I want you just to enjoy the game. And if there's something that's lacking or something that's overdone or a situation that comes up, just trust your game master and do the right thing and move on. So he doesn't always like to answer those rules questions, but we all know that they're there. So think of it as a framework that's just in a book that thick instead of that thick.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's such a huge story, and you can add so much to it, and you can create your entire worlds. I love the Rift system. I mean, I've loved it since I was a teenager. But it gives you the opportunity as a GM when you're game mastering that system. Is you have to take in all those factors and you have to house rule and you have to polish and you as a GM have to make it meld. My goal as a GM is to make sure that the 2.5 hours I have with a player goes so fast that they're like, no, we want to hang out another half hour. Because if if that goal happens, they've had a good time, and that means I've had a good time, and they want to keep coming back. So anyway, that was my 2 cents on how everything kind of lines up with the with that. So
Well, I would like to say I think Riffs, that the cover of the original Riffs book was so evocative. It made you want to know what the heck that thing was. So you went out and bought the book, right? Yeah, I think I generally agree with what you're saying. Like when I look at a house rule or a homebrew rule, and I'm not 100% sure it's doing what I think it's doing, there's a few like red flags, things that I look for. Does this house rule or homebrew rule end up nerfing something that already exists? Again, going back to like the priest who wanted to be the staff master at level 1, well, that would totally nerf these other feats, right? Similarly, does it like negate another rule that already addresses it and doesn't cause any problems? Overpowered and underpowered rules, that I think comes with time as a game master. I think younger people love young kids when they're playing the game, they want to be able to roll the big numbers and all that stuff. So a house rule that's overpowered, they might be okay with. Like me, I'm on the flip side. I'm a real stingy DM. I'm gritty. You're in the muck. You're born in the mud. You're gonna die in the mud. I'm mudcore all the way, baby. So I have a tendency to underpower things. That's actually my weakness and something I'm trying to work on. I tend to just make things underpowered to the detriment of my players. So I'm working on that. Not seeing a therapist or anything, but yeah, those are the kind of things I look for once a house rule or a homebrew set of rules has been introduced. Like, is this thing happening? And at the end of the day, though, again, not to bring up the thing but are people having fun with it? And if the answer is no, then you have to start asking why, like what's not working here,
right.
So and part of asking why may also be your players are just griping because that's what players are going to do, in which case a conversation needs to be made, or had, but maybe, like I said earlier, with, the rules as written stuff, if no one's having fun and they're not griping, maybe there's something fundamental that needs to be reviewed, modified, omitted, added to, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Well, I keep open dialogue with them all, and again, it's 2.5 hours, 3 hours of time that we're all choosing to spend together. So if we need to modify things, if we need to buff things, I keep going back to that saying, but if we need to buff things, then because we are actively telling the story together, and if it's not working mechanically, then the GM's got to get involved. We got to make it mechanical and stuff like that. We got to make it functional and realistic in a way. Even though we're playing a game is a fantasy and a superpower, we still have to add that element of realism to be basically a good judge of the situation.
Anything you want to add, Daniel?
Realistically, it's pretty simple. It is the core of rules as intended. If I have a house rule that is not having the intended impact, it gets changed or modified. Great example, running a 3.5 D&D campaign. I basically, for each narrative segment, would have the party as a whole. They could roll a D100, and that was their luck. For various different things that happened, kind of worked like the Call of Cthulhu luck system, where throughout, various different things is, are you lucky? Hey, is there this, can I make, is there a way I can do this to make the jump? Are there vines nearby, or whatever the case may be? In a lot of cases, it would be roll a D100 and tell me if it's under your luck. And you guys are well within your purview to spend, I believe I started at 3-1, 3 luck points to get a +1 on a roll. But those 3 points are gone until the end of that narrative segment. So you're lowering the party's luck by trading these points away to get these bonuses. And I started at 3-1, and I very quickly realized that nobody was ever going to spend luck to increase their a roll, because 3-1 was just not worth the bonus. Not when, it would impact other things in the game when they really needed their luck. So I reduced it. And, I even got down to where it was a 1-to-1 trade or a 1 for a +2 in order to push that kind of thing down the line. But it never quite had the intended effect, because I came to realize that, especially in 3.5, their ability to set their characters up in a way to where the bonuses were never, ever worth changing the luck situation. And if I were a 4D player, I would just always have 100 luck for the party every time, because whatever they want just magically.
And it costs no points.
It costs no points. I just make it appear in the world because it's there, because I want it to be for whatever reason. It's like I walk outside and I get in my 69 Camaro with the 427 aluminum small block, and I fire it up and I go to the car show and I pull all the tail.
Daniel,
oh, wait a minute. I don't actually have one out there.
I have a pen.
Damn it. It didn't work. The 4D role playing didn't work. I needed my 69 Camaro.
So
I like
so,
the 4D guys. I'm just going to say that. I like the 4D guys. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
some of them.
Here's what I see. I see the Bro SR as the, kind of rednecky club that, kind of the rest of us don't really want to be in, and they're just kind of obnoxious, and they're driving around in their squatted trucks blowing diesel smoke out of their inefficient engines all over the place. I see the 4D guys as like a TVR owner, or like somebody who's reads the New Yorker and is really proud about the fact that they read the New Yorker. They just all kind of sit back with the two of them with their brandy in one hand and their wingback, their ancient leather-bound wingback chair, and you just simply don't understand the intricacies of our 4D role-playing. I guess you just aren't sophisticated enough.
Oh, my God.
So folks who watch this video later, just so you know, this is not a discussion on 4D or Bro SR. I don't want any comments on it. I don't care.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said anything. That was damn funny. That was
all good. So what I would like to
tell
do,
me
though,
your Mercedes has wiper blades that clean off your headlamps, please. And how great
we do have to get into segment 4, even if nobody shows up, and we have less than 20 minutes left. Basically, we'll have 15 by the time we get there. But I want to ask one, but please answer quickly if you can. And we'll start with Kepler because it's your segment. Pretend you're talking to a new game master, or a game master who doesn't have a lot of confidence, who, now that he's made this house rule, is scared to go back on it. So can you, I guess, share an example would be the easiest way of saying it, when reverting a rule maybe felt like admitting failure at first, but later proved to be the smarter choice in the long run?
So yeah, there's been a couple times that I've been in a game that where the GM had to do that, and it was basically he given this guy a sword, and the sword actually affected everybody around it. It wasn't a mechanic that was actually written for AD&D Second Edition, but it was an effect that he thought would be cool to do that, and the player presented it to the GM and went out there, and he got to finding that he had to keep upping what he had to do to beat that, because we're all regenerating health and we're all regenerating, no, I guess it would be stamina or whatever it was called. It's been a while since I played Second Edition, but it was a positive effect to the detriment of the game. It was no longer fun because he's whipping out that sword. That sword's doing its thing. You could actually cut through an ogre and it'd be no problem because everybody was regenerating so much like that. And he actually was very worried about destroying the game, because out where we're at, there's not a lot of gamers that get together physically, and it was a physical game that we were all sitting at. And so he's worried about that. And I actually looked at him and said, man, if it's no longer fun for you, and it's no longer fun, and other party members have come to you about it, it's okay to approach that person and say, hey, this has got to go. And if they're reasonable in any way, they're going to say, you know what, I'd rather game with the beer and the pretzels, as Lord Mathis says, or the pizza or whatever, for the benefit of the game together for everybody. More of a harmonious situation to bring it in. So that was one instance where that worked. There was another instance where somebody didn't like the THACO system. We could talk all night on the THACO system. I actually don't have a problem with it, but they ruled something where it was the table would move up and down almost with the GM's win. It was a disaster, and he came back and said, this was a mistake. We're going to play it as written because we can't make this work because it's too much of a benefit to the players. So anyway, I hope that didn't take too much time there.
Okay. Lord Matty's Driving Dragons, any examples that you got real quickly that where it seemed like, well, actually, maybe somebody, either you or somebody was afraid to admit failure at first, but in the end, it proved to be the smarter choice to revert back. Because a lot of people, like once they put their flag in the ground, they're like, nope, this is the hill I'm dying on now, and I can't go back on this. I'll look like I'm a dum dum, instead of just admitting like, what, that just didn't work out as well. And
I actually have a good example, and it's from my current Gods of the Forbidden North game. So, without going into a lot of detail, I wanted to run my Gods of the Forbidden North game different from my Lamentations of Elemental Evil game. That was like started off raw and slowly house ruled. Okay, this I wanted to do more like a game of games. Anything goes. It's OSR. If you got an OSR module that or a supplement or something, that you want to use, we'll bring it in, right? So we got like RPG pundit stuff. We got but the core book is the rule cyclopedia. Okay, and I'm just whatever we can do, and because I'm using 1-to-1 time. Some of my players are doing stuff in between game sessions, and I was starting house ruling a lot of them. And while it wasn't exactly a particular rule here or a particular rule there that was having a problem, it was the fact that the rule cyclopedia just didn't really cover everything. And all the house rules that I was coming up with on the fly, the rulings over rules, and then trying to codify them, I was starting to run into a lot of problems because there was like all this stuff was coming at me at once. And then I turned and I looked and I saw Adventure Conquer King system. And that's when I waved the white flag. I go, guys, I'm not smart enough, nor do I have the time to try to resolve everything that you guys want to do with like these house rules. So I know what we were doing before, some of the stuff you liked, some of the stuff maybe you didn't like. We're going to start switching to Adventure Conquer King system to handle some of the stuff we're doing. And it was probably the smartest decision I made because a lot of my stalwart 5e players who hate OSR stuff and have been grumbling are like, they started reading Adventure Conquer King and they're like, wow, this was actually pretty cool, and it's made things a lot easier. And I get excited about the downtime orders and like all the stuff that's happening. So I would say that's an example where I was just like, yeah, this isn't working.
That's interesting because I would have gone in a different direction. I would have gone towards Forbidden Lands. It's more rules light. It gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of like I can just adjudicate. I think that's difficult, so -2 or whatever it happens to be, instead of worrying about specific rules. But I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm not arguing with you on that one.
Sure.
It's just interesting that you went to a game that theoretically is way more complex.
Well,
the dude is crazily autistic.
Oh yeah, well let me tell you why. Because I have players who treat the game somewhat adversarially with me. Like I try to tell them, like, look, I'm not trying to kill you. I mean, I am, but I mean, like, I'm letting the dice fall where they may. So they're like really concerned. So they do look at the rules and make sure they're looking at me and like, does this make sense? And and so by pointing to Adventure Conquer King and saying like, these are the rules we're going to use. It's a common language, lingua franca, they feel more comfortable now. Some of them I don't think are thrilled, but for the most part, things are running a lot smoother since making that switch. So,
okay. And Daniel, any final comments on that so we can actually hopefully get one person in for our next segment?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that, and we all fall prey to this in one version or another. I have never been one who is unable to pivot. So I'm fully capable of being like, well, that didn't work out the way it was supposed to. And I've twitched it and tweaked it and adjusted it 4 or 5 times. And it's time to just change the part. I've never been one who's been too personally invested in that. However, I think we all get into a situation where we've had something we wanted to try and we know it can work and we've made it work 100,000 different times, 100,000 different ways. We've thought it through a dozen times. We've run simulations. We know it can work. It just keeps failing. And I will get caught up in that. And I'm like, no, damn it, this works. It needs to work. I know it works, but I can't, at one point you have to be like, this juice ain't worth the squeeze. And a lot of times we get that. I mean, it could be working perfectly as intended and have the effect, but your players just don't buy into it. And you have to recognize that and say, it doesn't matter how great this is, the players ain't buying in. So we need to move on from something. We need to make that adjustment. And it's just really a matter of looking back and thinking dispassionately about your game. Looking at it just purely as like an experiment from like a very scientific mindset where it's like it works or it doesn't work and you need to make the adjustments, and not being personally either by ego or passion wrapped up in whatever that little piece is. Cut the appendix out, let the rest of the body survive. Quit trying to save it.
Don't worry, I had mine removed when I was 1.5 years old. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. It's gone. All right. Well, there we go. Hopefully we didn't leave too much on the floor. I really need to try to have time for at least one person to call in, even if it doesn't happen. Call in, you know what I'm saying? Join us. Even if it doesn't happen. Things went long today because a couple of the super chats or whatever the comments, you got a lot of commentary on it because you guys had some good questions, but I have to follow the time frame of the show. So that means that we're gonna have to end segment 3 here. So hopefully they didn't leave too much on the table, but you know what? If they did, we can talk about it a little bit more in the members only portion of it, where I tend to chime in just a bit more as well. And I took some notes today. I got my notes. So we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But become a legitimate channel member by hitting that join button. You can also support us after the live stream with a super thanks. It really helps us know that you truly like this content and want more of it. And I have been getting some silent support, a couple of Ko-Fis, or it wasn't Ko-Fi, it was PayPals. So thank you very much to you out there who have done that. I assume that those people want to be silent supporters, so I don't mention names, but you know who you are, and I really appreciate that. Do you think that you have more panel presence, better opinions, more experience, or something else to improve upon a panel like this? Well, sign up on the GMI Discord. Link is in the description. Read the rules, find a panel topic that interests you, and sign up. In segment 4, we bring you in. Well, we'll bring one person in. Hopefully we have time for that to talk to our panelists about tonight's topic. I'll post a link to join in just a moment, just in case. I won't try to get to everybody. I will get to the first person that pops in. Now, if 2 people kind of pop in right away, I'm going to pick somebody that I know is a member of Super Chatter first. If that, otherwise, whoever pops in first is going to be the one person who gets in to talk to us tonight. And no, I don't let people, by the way, I don't let people hang out for the members only anymore. That was starting to get a little weird, and we'll just, leave it at that. So we'll revert back to the full panel here once that is over. So we check the chat. In the meantime, I will get the link out there for people. Was there anything I starred? Yes, there was one. Seraphis, good to see you, sir. He's got a nice Sunday morning stream. Well, Sunday morning our time. He lives in some fake time zone that doesn't exist, so I'm sure it's like evening or something for him. Australia. Sure. Yeah, I can mispronounce Austria as well. My cuz gave me valuable GMing advice. Example, if the players create necromancy in your world, well, they've opened the door to evil necromancers now. I've always kept that in mind. What do you guys think?
No, conceptually. It's true. If you make a busted house rule and your players want to bitch, cry, and moan that you're going to take it away because they've been abusing the hell out of it, just go get some bad guys to abuse it right back, and they'll change their mind real quick.
Yeah, I think anything that you're doing, especially, and this is why I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but anyway, any house rule that you put in, any homebrew, it should be good for the goose, good for the gander kind of thing. so if you create a a new class or something, yeah, there's going to be evil versions of that class, or maybe, or whatever. They could be adversaries. So yeah, I'm totally on board with that. I don't like. I think if you're going to have a world that makes sense, that has some sort of realist verisimilitude to it, I don't think you should make the players too centrally focused as like the spotlight. I know like more narrative type games, the players are the spotlight, but like if it's so focused on them where they're the superheroes, I sort of feel like the game loses stakes, and it kind of disconnects from the real world in some sense and starts losing believability. If the players know that things can be used against them, even if for like a narrative game, it's just gonna be more impactful. So that's my take.
All right. Well, we do have
Create a
somebody here.
pen, they can stab your hand with it.
Stop it. All right, Nerdy Ogre, what you got?
Hey,
And unfortunately, you're not even going to get the full 5 minutes today. You're going to get about 4.5.
that's fine. Lord Matty has kind of touched on this a little bit ago, but at what point do you stop, home brewing and house ruling and just say, maybe we're playing the wrong system?
Oh, that goes into like the raw argument and the raw debate, right? Like if you're starting to house rule too much, then yeah, maybe you are. I think this is where understanding the intent comes in. And I think if you've been playing raw, if you played your game raw enough where you understand the syntax, like the whys of the rules, I don't think your house rules are going to be such that you're creating an entirely new game, or it would justify a new game, because you understand the why. I go back to the backpack example. I didn't create an entirely new rule about backpacks. What I did was I absorbed a rule that already existed in the game to keep it consistent with Lamentations of the Flame Princess. So I think consistency is key right there. If you start becoming inconsistent, maybe take a step back and go, maybe we should be looking at Forbidden Lands or Palladium versus Rule Cyclopedia or something.
I heard Nerdy Ogre hates Palladium, so I wouldn't bring that up to him.
Oh, okay. Forget I said that.
I think that when you ask the question, when do you get to the point where you say, hey, house rules are not the fix here, we're on the wrong system? That's going to vary greatly based on the type of game you're playing and what you're doing. However, I would say a very good place to start is when you start having to house rule the core mechanic of the game in order to make it fit, you are now beyond where house rules should be. So if I'm running Dungeons and Dragons and I'm having to say, well, I'm chopping hit points all the way down to only one hit die because the hit points are too much and they're not giving me the lethality that I want. Or I start having to manipulate the very basic roll D20, go high system for whatever I'm using to try and make something happen. Now I'm in a position where I need to start looking for a new core rule book, because the core rules are what are failing my game, which means I'm in the wrong place altogether. So there's no great silver bullet for that question. There's no universal answer, but that's a very, very good place to start. If I walk out and I want to go fast around a racetrack, sure, there's trucks that can do it, but it's probably easier for me to get a 2-seater sports car than to keep trying to get my diesel pickup to go around it.
Agreed.
Yep. Well, go ahead.
No. If you got an answer to that, go ahead. Sure, you're the panelist.
No, I was just saying, as far as it goes with that, I mean, like the Savage World system or something like that. If you want a more expanse where you can, good for the gander, good for the goose, as they were saying earlier. I mean, equally what you give your player characters, you can give to your NPCs that are for and against them. I mean, the benefit system that they have in there works well, because everybody can get them, and it's up to the GM on how well you play
You are my new
your
best friend.
characters.
Anybody in chat, and everybody in chat knows why.
Well, I'll let you fill me in on why I'm your new best friend a little bit later, because I must have not caught that.
I hate talking like a 3-year-old, so I hate the word bennies.
Oh, yeah.
You said benefits, and that's
well, yeah. I don't like saying Benny either. That's why I said benefit. So.
all right, Nerdy Ogre. Thank
right.
you very much for popping in. Unfortunately, I do have to wrap this up and go to the members only section. I do appreciate you coming on in here, and boop, there we go. Popped him out, and then all right, folks. There we go. We only had time for one. I have a hard cutoff at 2.5 hours. We're going to be probably 2 hours and 31 or 32 minutes this time. Oops. But I got to do that. I'll work on it if that becomes an issue. Nobody's complained yet, but if that becomes an issue. But that is it for the public portion of the show. Get this back up over here the right way. There we go. Please leave a comment of who you believe had the most compelling, interesting, or novel position. Did you learn anything new that you may try at your table? Let us know in the comments. YouTube members, hold on. There is more to come, so don't go anywhere. Sincere thank you to everyone who supported the show with Super Chats, Rumble Rants, and memberships, and to all of you who made me drink. Who took the time to join us tonight. Finally, thank you very much to tonight's panelists for their time and for their informative and spirited discussion. Although there are 2 demerits to Daniel for being late. Be sure to subscribe to their channels. Buy the book. It's an anthology. You want it. Or check out their content through the links in the description. With that, I look forward to doing this again next time.